So, before we look at this list here, guys, because you're going to have to put this list down, let's quickly go back up to what we said was a class of transaction. Now we say, before you go and audit revenue, let's use revenue as an example, you need to make sure that what you are going to audit agrees to what you are going to give an opinion on. You're giving an opinion on revenue that's sitting in the financial statements. But look at what we've got under here for the financial statements. You are just going to have that total revenue amount. So you can't test or do your testing from that total amount. It's R1, it's a line item in the financials. You have to test revenue and the details of revenue based on what's here in the journal, because this has got all the transactions that make up that revenue amount. So before I start testing what's in the journal here, I need to make sure that these match. The journal matches to the total in the journal matches to the total in the financial statements. Otherwise, I'm going to express an opinion on the amount in the financials, which is not going to correlate with the work that I've done. Guys, and you think it's obvious, but honestly, sometimes what happens is they go and they put total revenue is 150,000 Rand here. And then when you go and look at the journal, total revenue is 120,000, and it's because they have decided that they need to reverse a transaction in the journal. So they've done the reversal in the journal, but they haven't gone and put that into the financials. So what happened was they did a reversal here. They took out 30,000 because they realized this related to 2018 and we're doing 2017. But they did this on the 2nd of January, but they prepared the financials on the 1st of January. So if I don't go and make sure that what's in the journal that I'm going to test, because I will now go and obviously test this 30,000 reversal to make sure it's right, because that's what's in the journal that I'm testing. But if I don't go and do that matching, then I'm going to go and give an opinion on 150,000 Rand of revenue, which is not actually their revenue. Their revenue is 120. Okay, and I'll give you a practical example. I, on my very first audit, had to audit revenue, and that's why it's so easy for me to talk about this, because I went, got the journal from the client, started selecting my samples, had to select a ridiculous number of transactions for my samples, went to the accounting clerk and asked them for the invoices for the sample. And then the next day when the manager came in and I was happily ticking away my sample, he said to me, guys, are you working off the updated trial balance? So I said, oh, what do you mean, what trial balance? Oh no, they put through some adjusting entries, and yeah, we need to be working from the adjusted trial balance. Now, had I done this recon up front, I would have seen that the journal and the trial balance that I was working for differed to the adjusted trial balance. And I would have then questioned, what am I supposed to be expressing an opinion on in terms of the revenue amount? But I didn't, so I'd selected all my samples, and then because the journal had actually changed, I had to go back and reselect my samples, because I have to select my samples from the complete journal that matches to the financials. Otherwise, I'm giving an opinion on a different amount. So it makes sense. Before I start doing any testing, always go and agree your journal or the list of things that you are going to be testing to what's in the financials, because that's what you're going to be reporting. So first and foremost, my general procedure is going to be agree the closing amount in the journal or the list of transactions that I'm going to be selecting from to the general ledger, the trial balance, and the financial statements. The most important of these is actually the financial statements, because that is what I'm going to be expressing my opinion on. But I'm going to be selecting my samples from the list of transactions or the journal. Just note, you guys, this is a general procedure and I've made it very general. I've said from the journal. You need to go and make this journal applicable to what it is you're testing. So are you testing revenue? Then you're going to say the sales journal. Or is it purchases? The purchases journal. Or is it payroll? The payroll journal. Okay. Or is it additions of PPE? Then you're going to say from the additions list. Because you don't have a journal for PPE transactions because they happen so infrequently. So you're just going to say, get the list of additions and trace that back to the additions note in the financial statements, your PPE note, which has your total additions. Okay. Then, again, before I start selecting my samples, I want to make sure that what I'm selecting from does actually add up. So look here. Once again, I'm going to be selecting samples from this journal, which is going to be made up of lots of transactions. I want to make sure that they haven't just put a random amount here and then made that same random amount in the financials. I want to make sure that this amount here actually does add up. So before I go and select my sample, I will then say, please go and cast the journal, again being specific with the type of journal, or the list of transactions. So it does actually add up so that the two match to the financials and it's correct. Okay, then once again, before I select my samples, I want to make sure that there's nothing in that journal that potentially shouldn't be there. So all I have to say is go and inspect the journal or the list of transactions for any unusual items. And you can be specific here. You could say if you were doing for revenue, you could say for any debits, because you expect there shouldn't be. Or you could say for any zero amounts, because that doesn't really make sense. But you don't also have to be specific. You can just get the 1 mark for saying unusual items. Then, ISA 580, which says you must always get a management rep letter. So as a general procedure, before I start, always get a management representation letter addressing the relevant assertions or all the assertions. And I say relevant assertions, guys, because sometimes the required could limit you to specific assertions. So they say to you, please only test existence. Then you know I'm going to get a management rep letter for existence. I don't have to worry about all the other assertions because the required has limited me. And then finally, you must do analytical review procedures and you must give examples. ISA 520, which deals with your analytical procedures. But just so you know, we're doing comparisons here. So you need to do a comparison between the total of the class of transaction in the current year to the prior year to see if it's reasonable. So in our example here is we're doing revenue. So I'm going to say compare revenue in the prior year to the current year to see if it's reasonable. Maybe I want to do debtors then as well. Compare debtors in the current year to the prior to see if it's reasonable. The reason why I say debtors is because it's related to revenue. So it makes sense to do an analytical procedure with a related balance or class of transaction. Okay, so guys, you are going to get at least 5 to 7 marks for putting down general procedures, but they won't guide you to do so in a question. They're just going to say substantively audit repairs and maintenance, or substantively audit additions of PPE, or substantively audit revenue. then you need to know, okay, what's my exam technique starting point? Put down my general procedures. Don't study them off by heart. Think about it logically. What are you doing? You're testing a class, lots of transactions that are sitting in the financials. But in the financials, I've only got a random amount. I need to test the detail which is sitting in the journal or in a list of things. So I need to first make sure that that list matches the financial statement. So I just need to compare. I must then make sure that that list adds up. So that they haven't just put a random total there. It must add up. Then I must make sure there's nothing strange in that list. Quickly looking through it. I must get a management rep letter, and I must do analytical procedures. And I've easily got some marks. Now my second step, I've said here, is you need to put down the applicable assertions. And again, it's the assertions that are relevant to this class of transaction, and or if the required has specifically limited you to specific assertions. So I put them down as headings so that I remember to test all of them. Therefore, I address all the risks. Otherwise, I know the procedures and the assertions I must test, but I forget to put them all down, and then I'm losing procedures and marks.